Please pay no attention to the bookshelves behind me. I was in the process of unpacking my books, so just pretend like this isn't even happening. How many of these do I have on my shelf? Should have had them sitting right here. That would have been cool if I just had them like sitting out somewhere. Oh well, too late now. Hello and welcome back or welcome to my channel. If you are new here, it's been a minute since I've done one of these, but we are back with the third installment of Read It or Watch It. If you have not seen the first two videos in this series, I will have it above in a card and also linked down below in the description box. But basically, this is a series where I talk about 6 books, 3 that have been adapted into a series and 3 that have been adapted into movies, and I tell you whether or not I think you should read it or watch it. That explanation was probably completely unnecessary because it's literally in the title, So, starting off with the series, first up we have Dark Matter. This is a sci-fi novel by Blake Crouch that was published in 2016 that follows a man named Jason who is kidnapped or adult napped, or is there a word for that? Abducted? He was abducted. He was abducted, and when he wakes up, everything that he knows about his life is completely different. His house is different, his job is different, his family is gone, just everything about his life is just completely different. And so he's trying to first figure out like what happened, like what the heck is going on. And then he has to figure out like how to return to his version of normal. I'm trying not to say too much and like give anything away or spoil anything, but if you like sci-fi action suspense, then this is one that is definitely worth checking out. And this 9-episode series is a new release in terms of adaptations, having premiered just a few months ago on Apple TV. I think the adaptation does a really good job of like staying true to the source material, which readers tend to appreciate. And I think it definitely helped that many of the episodes were written by the author himself. It's an adaptation, so of course there were some things that were, changed or added, but honestly, this is probably one of the better adaptations that I've seen, where you really get to see like the things and places and events that are described in the book like really come to life on screen, almost like bar for bar. I think the director made some interesting choices like visually, and I think that's part of what made the show like interesting to watch. I do think the show was a little slow, so if you don't like those long drawn out scenes or lingering camera shots, then maybe this won't be the show for you. It's a little bit unbalanced between like the slower scenes and the action scenes. You do get more of those like slower, suspenseful, like artistic scenes, but when you get to the action scenes, the action be actioning, okay? I'm not completely sure whether or not this is going to be getting renewed for a second season. Back in June, there was no official announcement. I did see some stuff online that said that it would be getting renewed for a second season, but not entirely sure how reliable those sources are, so unclear for now. But either way, if there is a second season, it will be completely made up because they have already covered everything that's in the book and it's a standalone, so there's no more like source material to pull from. But if there is a second season, I'm interested to see like where it's going to go. I suspect that we'll probably be following the side characters because there were like some loose ends there that like weren't quite tied up, probably for that exact reason. So do I think that you should read it or watch it? You're probably waiting for me to say, oh, the book was better. But actually, I would say it depends on how much time you really want to invest into this. I would say that if you just kind of want to get through it, then I would recommend reading it because depending on how fast you read, you might be able to read it faster. Or if you decide to listen to it on audio, it's like a 10-ish hour audiobook. So if you listen to that at like 2 times speed, then you can get through it in half that time. Versus if you watch it, just know that you're signing up for 9 hours that you can't like fast forward or speed up. But like I said, they're both good in their own right, especially if you like sci-fi action suspense. So you can't really go wrong with either one. But if I have to choose one, I'm gonna say watch it. Next up is one of my favorite books, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. You've probably heard me talk about this so many times on my channel. This is a YA thriller by Holly Jackson that was published in 2019 that follows a high school senior named Pip who is doing her capstone project on the infamous Andy Bell case, which was a cold case from 5 years ago where the news and police basically reported that Andy Bell went missing, and then subsequently her boyfriend came forward and confessed to the murder, and then he unalived himself. But all of that doesn't really sit right with Pip, and so she is now determined to figure out what really happened. Now, I'm not an expert in like YA thrillers, but I've read a couple, and I will say that this was without question one of the best ones that I've ever read. So if you fancy YA thrillers, this is a must read. One thing that's important to note as well here is that more than just the cover is slightly different between the US and the UK editions. Things like the locations are changed. Also, some of like the different like colloquial like slang and stuff is changed, more so to fit the audience that it's catering to. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, this 6th episode, I'm going to call it a mini series because it only had 6 episodes, is also a new release in terms of Adaptations, having just premiered just a few days ago on Netflix if you're in the US, or last month if you were in the UK. Not sure if any other countries had to wait a month like we did in the US, but that was super annoying, Netflix. So if you're watching this, please don't ever do that again. I'm not gonna lie, I was a little disappointed with this adaptation, if I'm being honest. The only like redeeming quality was the banter between Pip and Ravi, and also like the girl love between like Pip and Kara and Lauren. But everything else about this show was kind of boring. The star for me really was Ravi. Like, that actor killed it. I wanted to like Pip, I really did, so bad, especially after seeing her in Wednesday, but her performance was a little bit flat, and she basically just looked like this the entire show. And it's like, okay, hun, like that's great, but like, can you give us anything else? The book, I think, had a lot more clues and was much more like suspenseful, but the show felt a little stiff and slow. Like, even the music was boring. It was like they were just going through the motions, you know, ticking the boxes, hitting the highlights of the book, just to be able to say that they did it, but there was no like emotion behind any of it, if that makes any sense. Now, to my knowledge, there is no word yet as to whether or not this will be getting a 2nd season. It very well could, because there are 2 more books in the series plus the prequel novella. So I guess we'll see. But if it wasn't obvious whether or not you should read it or watch it, I'm definitely going to say read it, because even the audiobook was more entertaining than this show. The last dedicated series in this list is a bit of a throwback. It's The Secret Circle, and this is a YA fantasy novel by L.J. Smith that was published in 1992 that follows Cassie, who moves to a new town with her mother to be closer to her grandmother. And when she returns to this town, she soon learns that she is, and I guess has always been, a witch. And now, stepping into this new world, it is unraveling a lot of family secrets, magical secrets, and these things put her in danger. Now, this does read a little more YA than like A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, for example, but it's fun and it's mysterious and involves witches, so it's a good time. This 22 episode series, whose theme song I am absolutely obsessed with, originally aired on the CW back in 2011, but was unfortunately canceled after only 1 season. This is a personal heartbreak that I still have not gotten over, because I loved this show. Now, the official reason for the cancellation is due to low ratings during the 2nd half of the 1st season, but it is alleged that the show was actually canceled because it was airing during the same time as another L.J. Smith adaptation that you may or may not be familiar with. And the ratings and viewership for The Secret Circle just wasn't as high as this other show, and so the network felt like the shows were too similar, and they didn't want to have to budget for both. They only wanted to have to budget for one, and so Secret Circle got the boot. Now, this adaptation does not follow as closely to the source material. Like, in the opening scene of the very first episode, for example, you see the main character's mother gets murdered. So like, right off the bat, the main character is moving in with her grandmother for a completely different reason than what it was in the book. And then there's a lot of other like changes that are made to the story, but the essence and the overall plot of the show still remains the same as the book. Now, I didn't mind the changes that they made. Maybe that's because I saw the show before I read the book, but personally, I think that the changes made the show better. It kind of aged it up a little bit, made it for a slightly older audience. So like, instead of like tee-hee, like we kiss, it's like, oh, we just had a one-night stand. So it's a little more dramatic, a little more mature. You know, it's creepy, it's suspenseful. It just sucks that it only got 1 season, because this book actually is a series. And so this could have gone on for a couple of seasons because the source material is there. Now, do I think that you should read it or watch it? I'm going to say watch it. The show is for sure better than the book, but it only has 1 season, so try not to get too attached like I did. Now, this next one has both a series and a movie adaptation, and that's And Then There Were None. Now, this is a mystery whodunit novel by Agatha Christie that was published in 1939, which follows a group of strangers who are invited to attend like this dinner at this rich guy's mansion on a remote island, and then one by one, the guests are mysteriously being killed off. Now, let me say that because this book is so so old. There are definitely parts of it that do not age well, but if you can look past that, it's definitely very well written. It's very unique for its time. It's the first, or at least one of the first books of its kind. So definitely a trailblazer in that respect in terms of like mystery whodunit genre. The movie came out in 1945 and the series came out in 2015. I didn't watch the movie because obviously it's outdated, and just knowing that certain aspects of the book didn't really age well, I really didn't have a desire to watch the movie, given that it came out not much longer after the book did. Plus, I had heard that they changed the ending of the movie. The series, however, actually is on par with the source material. It's a miniseries comprised of 3 episodes that are about an hour long each. Now, this is another adaptation that I thought was very well done. Again, following the book almost bar for bar, I was pretty impressed with how this was adapted. I feel like everything looked exactly as I pictured it when I was reading it. Now, I had a hard time understanding the end of the book. I thought that maybe like I missed something. So I was happy to be able to see what exactly was being described. Although I will say that it can be very triggering for some. And for that reason, many people opt to not watch the adaptation because it's, you know, much darker, much more graphic, like the book. But I actually wanted to see that because I couldn't like picture it in my head. It's very clear to me that this story was likely the inspiration for a lot of horror that came in the years following it. Like Saw, for example, is one of the franchises that I'm almost positive got its inspiration from this book, which is really cool to be able to see the parallels. So if you want to see an actual adaptation, like a true adaptation of this book, I highly recommend this show over the movie. I think that this is one that you really can't go wrong with either way, like when it comes to reading it or watching it. But if I had to choose, I would probably say, since parts of the book didn't really age well, you're probably better off watching it because the adaptation is so good and it does stay very true to the original source material. So yeah, definitely watch it. Before we move on to the straight movies category, take a second to give this video a thumbs up if you are enjoying it so far, and also subscribe if you are not already subscribed. Don't worry, we'll give you a second. Take your time. All right, on to the movies. So first up, we have Memento Mori. This is a short story by Jonathan Nolan that was published in 2001, which is about this guy. I literally don't know how to talk about this without spoiling it. This guy, I don't know, hopefully this isn't a spoiler, but this guy has short-term memory loss, and he's on a mission to find the man that he believes sexually assaulted and killed his wife. And that's all I'm gonna say. It's super short, it's like 12 pages, but it's interesting, fast-paced, a little suspenseful, a little bit confusing, but also like ultimately like very cool. And the concept is like kind of brilliant. The movie adaptation, which came out in 2000, was written and directed by the author's brother, who you may know as Christopher Nolan. I don't know, would this be considered a psychological thriller? Either way, the concept of the story is wild. The movie is long, I will say that. It's longer than I feel like it needed to be. It got to a point where I had to check the time to see how much longer was left. I'm like, just get to the ending already. It is very unique though, and it will have your head spinning. I enjoyed the short story more because it was short, and my impatience led to me getting a little bit frustrated with the movie, but the movie definitely gave me a better understanding of like what was going on. I got to the end of the short story and I was like, oh, like this was really interesting. Like I enjoyed that. And then someone asked me like what happened, and I was like, I have no idea. When you get to the end of the movie, it makes way more sense. Like I just couldn't believe it. I was just like, wait, go back. What? This is not a story you can just read once. This is not a movie that you can just watch once. I really feel like at a minimum, regardless whether you choose to read it or watch it, you need to do it twice in order for it all to make sense. So should you read it or watch it? I'm gonna say watch it. Last but not least is It Ends With Us. This is a contemporary novel by Colleen Hoover that was published in 2016 that follows the main character Lily in 2 different timelines. So you have the one where we're getting flashbacks to when she was a teenager and witnessing on a basically regular basis her mother experiencing domestic violence at the hands of her father. And then there's also the mysterious boy who lives in the abandoned house next door. And then in the present day timeline, she meets this very captivating, charming man that ultimately subjects her to similar experiences that she watched her mother go through. And the stories basically show how the cycle of abuse can repeat itself generation after generation. This one is yet another new release that came out just a few days ago, and I'm kind of in the middle on this one. I think the actors did a great job. I think the wardrobe was absolutely phenomenal. The cinematography, like, it was all, you know, good. I do think that the characters felt a little different. Like, for example, in the book, Ryle was very, like, charming and charismatic and dominant, like, very alpha. He was just the kind of guy that you could, like, easily fall for. But I feel like in the movie, he was much more, like, subdued. In fact, when I was talking to my mother about this, she agreed. And she said that he was kind of a which I thought was hilarious because that's exactly what I was thinking, but like I wasn't gonna say it. I also felt like Ryle's sister in the book had a lot more spunk and had more of like a go-getter, like take charge kind of attitude. And in the book, she seemed, you know, very bubbly, but not like as assertive as I would have expected her to be. Marshall contributed absolutely nothing to the storyline. They could have removed him from the movie altogether, and I don't think anybody would have noticed. And then with Lily, I felt like she was much more dominant in the movie than she was in the book. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, we love a strong, charismatic, charming leading lady, but that's just not quite what her personality was in the book. But I think overall, the movie, you know, it served its purpose. It got the point across, but I think some of the important like themes and messaging of the story are much more powerful and impactful in the book because you get a better understanding of like the thoughts and feelings that kind of motivate different characters and different actions rather than just like seeing the actions and having to infer what motivated a character to do whatever it is they did. Now, I'm not saying that the movie was bad, like not by any means, but the book was better. And you should read it. And those are all of the books, their respective adaptations, and whether I think you should read it or watch it. If you made it this far into the video, drop the film reel emoji down below in the comments. Also, if you've seen or read any of these, let me know what your thoughts were. I'm very curious to hear from you guys what you thought about it. Also, let me know down below in the comments what adaptations you think I should do next for the next installment of this series. Be sure to like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, and I will see you guys in another video. Bye.